there is something most readers of the Gospels miss the first time through. Jesus did not stumble into the cross. He did not get caught off guard by the religious leaders. He did not become a tragic victim of circumstances spinning out of control. From the very beginning of his ministry, Jesus knew exactly where he was going, and he told his disciples, not once, not vaguely, specifically, repeatedly. With increasing detail, he predicted his own death again and again over the course of 3 years. And every time he did, the disciples either misunderstood, denied, rebuked him, or simply went silent. Here is what almost nobody tells you. The predictions are not scattered randomly through the Gospels. They form a deliberate pattern. They escalate. Each one adds a new detail. Each one moves closer to the actual event. And by the time Jesus walks into Jerusalem for the final week, every disciple has heard the same prediction multiple times, with multiple specifics from multiple angles. There is no excuse for surprise. There is no possibility of confusion. The cross was not a tragedy that happened to Jesus. It was a mission he had been narrating to his disciples from the beginning. When you place every prediction in order and trace them across his ministry, you discover something staggering. Jesus knew the day, the place, the method, the betrayer, the people involved, the duration of his death, and even the outcome. He predicted it with the precision of a man reading from a script he had written himself, because in a sense, he had. The Lamb slain from the foundation of the world was walking through the very story he had inscribed in Scripture centuries before his arrival. Let me set the scene. The year is approximately AD 27. Jesus is somewhere between 30 and 33 years old. He has been baptized by John in the Jordan River. The heavens have opened. The Spirit has descended. The Father has spoken from heaven. And Jesus has begun calling his first disciples. He has performed his first sign at a wedding in Cana. He has cleansed the temple. He has begun teaching and healing. The crowds are growing. And somewhere in this early period, before most people understand what is happening, Jesus makes his first cryptic prediction. The first prediction comes in John chapter 2. It happens at the temple in Jerusalem. Jesus has just driven out the money changers, overturned tables, and made a whip of cords. The religious leaders confront him. John 2:18. What sign do you show to us, since you do these things? They want proof of his authority. They want him to perform a miracle to validate himself. And his answer is the first prediction of his death and resurrection ever recorded in the Gospels. John 2:19. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The religious leaders are baffled. John 2:20. It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days? They take him literally. They assume he is making an absurd architectural claim. But John, writing decades later, explains what Jesus actually meant. John 2:21. But he was speaking of the temple of his body. Therefore, when he had risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this to them. And they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had said. This first prediction is veiled. It is cryptic. The disciples do not understand it at the time. They only understand it years later after the resurrection. But the prediction is there from the very beginning of his ministry. The cross is not a late development. It is built into the foundation. 3 days, death, resurrection. The full structure of the gospel is announced in the first chapters of John in a single sentence that nobody understood. The second prediction comes in John chapter 3. The night a Pharisee named Nicodemus comes to Jesus secretly. Nicodemus is curious. He has seen the signs. He wants to understand. And in the middle of their conversation, Jesus says something that connects his coming death to one of the strangest stories in the Old Testament. John 3:14-15. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. He is referencing Numbers 21. The Israelites had been bitten by venomous serpents in the wilderness as judgment for their grumbling. God instructed Moses to make a bronze serpent and lift it up on a pole. Anyone who looked at the bronze serpent would live. The image of judgment became the means of healing. And Jesus, in his conversation with Nicodemus, applies that ancient story to himself. He must be lifted up. The Greek word is hupsu, which has a double meaning. It means to be lifted up physically on a cross, and it means to be exalted in glory. Both meanings are true. Both happened to Jesus. The second prediction adds new information. He will be lifted up. The method of his death is now hinted at. Crucifixion involved literal physical lifting on a wooden beam. But the disciples and Nicodemus do not catch it. The prediction passes them by. It will only make sense in retrospect. The third prediction shifts the tone completely. Up until now, the predictions have been veiled and metaphorical. But somewhere around the midpoint of his ministry, Jesus begins to speak openly about what is coming. The turning point is recorded in Matthew 16, Mark 8, and Luke 9. The scene is at Caesarea Philippi. Jesus has asked his disciples a question. Who do men say that I am? They give various answers. Then he asks who they say he is. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Matthew 16:16. It is a high moment. The disciples have finally understood. And then immediately after Peter's confession, Jesus delivers the first explicit prediction of his death. Matthew 16:21. From that time Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised the third day. Notice the precision. He will go to Jerusalem. He will suffer from specific groups, the elders, the chief priests, the scribes. He will be killed. He will rise on the third day. Every detail is now on the table. And notice the phrase, from that time Jesus began. Matthew is telling us this is the beginning of a new phase of his teaching. The veil has been pulled back. The predictions are no longer cryptic. They are direct. Peter cannot accept it. Matthew 16:22. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord. This shall not happen to you. Peter, who had just confessed Jesus as the Messiah, immediately tries to talk Jesus out of his mission. And Jesus responds with words so sharp they have echoed for 2,000 years. Matthew 16:23. Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. Peter could not hold both truths at once. He could believe Jesus was the Messiah. But the Messiah he had imagined did not die. The Messiah he had imagined conquered Rome, restored Israel, established a political kingdom. The death of the Messiah was unthinkable. And Jesus had to confront that wrong thinking immediately, because the cross was not a detour from the mission. The cross was the mission. The fourth prediction comes shortly after, in Matthew 17, Mark 9, and Luke 9. It happens just after the Transfiguration. Jesus and 3 of his disciples have come down from the mountain where Jesus had appeared in glory beside Moses and Elijah. Now they are back among the crowds, and Jesus pulls his disciples aside privately. Matthew 17:22-23. Now while they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and the third day he will be raised up. And they were exceedingly sorrowful. This prediction adds a news element, betrayal. He will not just be arrested, he will be betrayed. The Greek word is paradidomi, which means to hand over, to deliver up. Someone close to him will hand him over. The disciples are now hearing not just that Jesus will die, but that one of them will play a role in his death. They become exceedingly sorrowful. They do not understand. They do not want to understand. But the warning is on the record. If you are starting to see something here that you have never seen before, take a second and share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because the next predictions become more specific than the disciples could have imagined. The fifth prediction comes during the journey to Jerusalem. Jesus is taking the disciples on what would be their final road trip together. They are moving south slowly, deliberately, through Galilee, through Samaria, toward Judea. And along the way, Jesus stops them and delivers the most detailed prediction yet. Matthew 20:17-19, Mark 10:32-34, and Luke 18:31-33. Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again. Look at how specific this has become. Jerusalem is named, betrayal is named, the religious leaders are named, the Gentiles are named. The exact sequence is laid out: mocking, scourging, crucifixion, the resurrection. He is essentially giving them the passion narrative in advance. And he is telling them this not because he is hoping it will be true, but because he knows exactly what is going to happen. Luke adds a detail the other Gospels do not. Luke 18:34. But they understood none of these things. This saying was hidden from them, and they did not know the things which were spoken. Their minds could not hold what their ears were hearing. The Messiah they were following had just told them in plain terms that he was going to be tortured and killed, and they could not process it. The prediction sat in their memories like a sealed envelope that would only be opened after the cross. The sixth prediction is more subtle, but it carries enormous weight. It comes in John 12, just days before the final Passover. Some Greeks have come to a feast in Jerusalem and want to see Jesus. When the request reaches him, his response is strange. John 12:23-24. The hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Most assuredly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. He is using an agricultural metaphor. A seed cannot bear fruit unless it is buried and broken. The cross is going to be his burial, and the resurrection is going to be the harvest. And then he says it directly. John 12:32-33. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all peoples to myself. This he said, signifying by what death he would die. John adds the parenthetical explanation. Jesus was telling them how he was going to die, by being lifted up. Crucifixion was a Roman method of execution that required lifting the body off the ground. He is telling them not just that he will die, but specifically by crucifixion, a method that no Jewish court could carry out. Only the Romans could crucify, which meant his death would require both Jewish and Gentile involvement. The prediction is becoming impossible to ignore. The seventh prediction comes in the final week. Matthew 26:1-2. Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples, You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. 2 days. The exact countdown. Jesus is telling them not just that he will be crucified, but that it will happen at Passover. The timing is now down to the hour, and the Passover connection is profound. The Passover was the festival commemorating the deliverance of Israel from Egypt through the blood of a sacrificed lamb. Jesus is telling them he will die at the very festival that has been a shadow of his sacrifice for 15 centuries. The eighth prediction is in the upper room at the Last Supper, the night before the cross. Jesus is sharing a final meal with his disciples, and he takes the cup of wine and says something that no Jewish person had ever heard at a Passover meal before. Matthew 26:28, For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. He is predicting his death in real time. The cup that they are sharing is connected to the blood he is about to shed. The meal becomes a prophecy of the cross, and then he turns to the most painful prediction of all. He tells them that one of them at this very table will betray him. Matthew 26:21. The disciples are devastated. They each ask, Lord, is it I? Judas asks, and Jesus tells him directly. Matthew 26:25. You have said it. The traitor has been identified. The countdown is at hours, and Jesus knows every detail of what is coming next. He even predicts Peter's denial. Matthew 26:34. Assuredly, I say to you that this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter cannot believe it. He protests vigorously. But within hours, the prediction will be fulfilled to the syllable. The ninth prediction comes in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is praying. The disciples are sleeping. He has just finished one of the most agonizing prayers in human history. He has asked the Father if there is any other way. He has accepted that there is not. And as Judas arrives with the temple guards, Jesus says one final thing that confirms how completely he saw what was coming. Matthew 26:45-46. Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. He knew the moment the soldiers were approaching. He knew the exact second the betrayal would arrive. He did not run. He did not hide. He walked toward the men who had come to arrest him, because every step had been predicted. Every detail had been declared. and now the mission he had been narrating for 3 years was about to be fulfilled in real time. So now look at the pattern. 9 major predictions escalating in specificity. First prediction was cryptic: destroy this temple. The second was metaphorical: the Son of Man must be lifted up. The third was direct but general: he must go to Jerusalem and die. The fourth added betrayal. The fifth named the Gentiles and the method, crucifixion. The sixth named the cosmic effect: he would draw all peoples. The seventh named the timing: 2 days, Passover. The eighth happened at the table, identifying the traitor and the symbolism of the cup. The ninth happened in the garden, recognizing the moment as it arrived. And there is something else worth seeing. Every prediction includes the resurrection. Not one of them ends with death. Every single time Jesus predicted his death, he also predicted that he would rise on the 3rd day. The cross was never the end of the story. The cross was always followed by the empty tomb in his predictions. The same Jesus who walked toward the cross with full knowledge was also walking toward the resurrection with full certainty. He was not just a martyr. He was a conqueror who knew the outcome before the battle began. This is why his death is unlike any other death in history. Other people die because they cannot avoid it. Jesus died because he chose to. He told the disciples this in John 10. He said, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again." The cross was not something done to Jesus, it was something he did. The crucifiers thought they were ending him. He was using their actions to accomplish a mission they did not even understand. And there is one more thing. Notice how the disciples respond to each prediction. The first prediction in John 2, they do not understand. The second prediction with Nicodemus, they are silent. The third prediction at Caesarea Philippi, Peter rebukes him. The fourth prediction in Galilee, they become exceedingly sorrowful. The fifth prediction on the road to Jerusalem, Luke says the saying was hidden from them. The sixth prediction about the grain of wheat, the crowd does not understand. The seventh prediction in the final week, the disciples seem to absorb it. The eighth prediction at the table, they are devastated. The ninth prediction in the garden, they are sleeping. The disciples never get ahead of the predictions. They never catch up. They never fully understand until after the resurrection, and maybe that is the point. The cross was a mystery that could only be understood from the other side. You could not see it coming and understand what it meant. You could only see it in retrospect after the empty tomb. The resurrection was the key that unlocked everything. After the resurrection, the disciples went back through every prediction Jesus had made and finally understood. The light of the empty tomb cast its glow backward over every sentence he had ever spoken about his death. Now consider what this means about Jesus himself. He was not a tragic figure. He was a sovereign one. Every step of his life was being lived inside a story he was telling. He was walking through prophecies he spoken centuries before through the mouths of the prophets. And he was speaking new prophecies as he walked, narrating his own journey in real time. The cross was not an interruption to his ministry. It was the climax he had been writing the whole time. And the resurrection was the punchline he had been building toward since the first prediction in John 2. This also means something about us. If Jesus could see his own death coming with that level of clarity and walk toward it anyway, then his love is not the love of someone who got caught off guard. It is the love of someone who counted the cost in advance and paid it willingly. He was not a victim of bad timing. He was the architect of his own surrender. Every nail, every wound, every drop of blood was part of a plan he had been carrying in his heart from before the world was made. Hebrews 12:2 captures it. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God, for the joy set before him. He could see the joy on the other side of the cross before he ever set foot on it. The joy of redeemed people, the joy of a restored creation, the joy of the bride he had come to purchase. That joy was visible to him through every prediction. The cross was not a destination. It was a doorway he had to walk through to reach what he had always wanted. And there is one more thing worth noticing. Every prediction was an invitation. Jesus was not just giving the disciples information, he was preparing them. He wanted them to know in advance. He wanted them to remember after the fact. He wanted them to look back and see that he had told them everything. The predictions were not just for his own sense of mission. They were for the church that would be born from his resurrection. He wanted the disciples to be able to say one day, "He told us this would happen. He told us he would die. He told us he would rise." And it happened exactly as he said. The reliability of the predictions is one of the strongest arguments for the truth of the gospel. Multiple gospel writers preserved them. Multiple disciples remembered them. Multiple specific details were fulfilled with precision. If Jesus had been a fraud, he would have predicted vague things. Instead, he predicted Jerusalem, the religious leaders, the Gentiles, the mocking, the scourging, the crucifixion, the 3 days, and the resurrection. And every single one came true. Think about a master pianist sitting down to play a complex symphony for the first time. To the audience, it sounds spontaneous. Each note seems to emerge in the moment. But the pianist has been practicing every passage for decades. He has memorized every measure. He could play the entire piece in his sleep. To him, there are no surprises. He knows what the next note will be before it arrives. Every fingering, every dynamic, every rest has been rehearsed thousands of times in his mind. The audience hears a performance. The pianist is executing a plan. That is what the ministry of Jesus was. The audience saw a story unfolding. Jesus was performing a piece he had been composing since before time began. The predictions are the printed score. We can hold them in our hands. We can see the notes he played and the notes he was about to play. And when we read them in order, we discover that the cross was never an accident. It was always the climax. The resurrection was never a surprise. It was always the final chord. And the man who walked through it all was always in control. Maybe the most striking thing in all of this is how loved we are. If Jesus could see every detail of his death coming and still chose to go through it, then his love for us is not naive. It is informed. He did not stumble into the cross hoping it would work out. He walked toward the cross knowing exactly what awaited him on the other side. The nails, the spear, the mockery, the abandonment. He saw it all, and he chose to go anyway, because we were on the other side of the cross, because the joy of redeemed people was visible to him from every angle. He died for people he had not yet met. He suffered for sins that had not yet been committed. He bore wounds that would heal wounds we did not yet know we had. There is no version of the cross where Jesus was caught off guard. Every prediction proves it, every detail confirms it, and every disciple who later wrote about it made sure to include the predictions, so that the church for 2,000 years would know that the Savior who died for them was not a victim. He was a king, and he walked to his throne by way of a cross because the throne was on the other side. He could see it the whole time, and he did not stop because of us. So what do you do with this? You do not need to memorize every prediction. You do not need to chart every detail. What you need to see is that the cross was not a story written by Pilate or the religious leaders or Judas or the Roman soldiers. The cross was a story written by Jesus. He authored it. He narrated it. He walked through it, and he came out the other side alive. This means that the same Jesus who predicted his own death with that level of precision is also the Jesus who knows your future with the same kind of vision. He sees every step of your life. He knows what is coming. He has not been caught off guard by anything that happens to you, the pain you are walking through, the sorrow you are carrying, the loss that has not made sense. He sees it. He saw it before you did, and he is not panicked. The same hand that wrote the script of his own crucifixion is writing the script of your story, and the resurrection is built into the ending. The disciples did not understand the predictions until after the resurrection. And in the same way, we may not understand the predictions woven into our own lives until we see the resurrection on the other side of every grief, every wound, every closed door. But the same God who predicted his own death and rose on the third day is the same God who has authored every story we are walking through. We can trust him with the script, because the man who walked toward the cross knowing exactly what was coming is the same man who promises us that no matter what comes, he is making all things new. The cross was not a tragedy. It was a victory. and every prediction was a love letter. A long, slow, escalating love letter that the disciples could only read backward, but that we can now read forward because they preserved it for us. Jesus knew. He always knew. He told them again and again, and he walked into Jerusalem on a donkey on the 10th day of Nisan, knowing every single thing that was about to happen, because he loved us more than he loved his own life, and because the joy set before him was worth every step. If this opened something up for you, help someone else find it. Subscribe. Drop a comment, even one word. Share this with someone who loves the Bible, and keep us in your prayers. God bless you.